Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing Podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an Agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top Agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Peter Eggleston, Global Product Marketing Director, Radiology IT at GE Healthcare. Welcome, Pete.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me and appreciate being able to be here and talk to you and your listeners.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for supporting the Boston Agile Marketing Meetup for so many years as well. I remember that you were a regular attendee when I used to hold those meetings on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's right. And I do miss those. Those were very valuable, especially getting together and sharing ideas with your peers.
Yes, I think it was. I think it was great, and we should think about doing some virtual events. But let's first set the context for our listeners with respect to the various marketing roles at a very large company like GE Healthcare. Can you tell us about the various types of marketing functions and roles there, as well as your role in the organization?
Sure, that's a great idea, especially because GE Healthcare is a huge company. A good number of divisions and product lines within those. So it's always confusing to somebody, what we mean by marketing. So roughly we have a corporate marketing that oversees a cohesive brand and investor-focused messaging. Then at a more localized marketing teams that are closer to the products. So for corporate, we essentially have brand, public relations, Marcom, events, and those are sort of how the three main functions. And they'll operate to do what they need to do for whatever objectives they have, but they'll also interface with the more localized teams and synchronize across those teams. So at the product line, we have what you would traditionally think of as Marcom, marketing communications, which also handle events, and then field marketing, or sometimes called revenue marketing, and they run tactics and campaigns. And then we have product marketing, where I sit, and I think all your listeners know product marketing is that function which sits between product and engineering, sales, as well as the other types of marketing teams. So the product marketing role that I and my colleagues are in are very much what you would expect. But also for all these product lines or divisions, there's regional as well as global roles. So product marketing, as you would expect, oversees the research, works with the product managers on their roadmaps, launches new products into market, and generates both revenue, marketing, and sales enablement. And that includes brochures, presentations, webinars, videos, speaking engagements, and so forth.
Great. And what about your role in the organization?
Sure. Where I sit is at the global product marketing level. So I have responsibility for product lines. And in my case, it's radiology IT products. Those are essentially the radiology type viewers, the viewer that you would see your doctor reading off of if you went in for some sort of imaging, as well as the imaging storage systems and what they call the enterprise imaging type products, which are collaboration products and data sharing and whatnot. And so in a global role, I'm responsible for primarily being the interface with the product teams on their strategy and taking products to market, and then try to coordinate across all the regional teams to bring those products to market and represent them back at corporate with any issues or needs they might see in their regions with their products.
Great. So tell me a little bit about product development there in digital IT. I mean, do your product and engineering teams use Agile?
Yeah, so we do, but in reality, it's difficult. Fundamentally, we create medical products, and these are heavily regulated and such as because of that, they need to be, there's numerous and very well-defined processes and documentation milestone requirements on the release of any product. So what this means is that there's a rigorous multi-step process used to both create as well as bring a product to market. And that's essentially a waterfall process. We refer to this process internally as our phased release discipline. But within that, the product engineering teams do try to layer on an Agile-like process to create and groom backlog, to do prioritization of the backlog, and then to burn down those backlog with development sprints. But at the end of the day, it's release gated and very much a waterfall.
Well, let me dive in a little bit deeper. So if the product releases follow the PRD process, a waterfall approach, how does that affect marketing's activities or instance? Do you need to follow a waterfall approach or can you actually use Agile?
Well, it's essentially a similar situation with how product and engineering need to operate. So product marketing utilizes a new commercial activation process that's also waterfall. It's a waterfall methodology that's synchronized with the product and engineering phase release discipline. So at each milestone that the product team has, we have a corresponding marketing milestones, and they basically support those product development milestones, such as providing research for decisions and the creation of business plans, gathering outcome evidence to initially assure that the product is performing as it's intended or designed to, and so forth. But many of those tasks and milestones either directly or indirectly support the commercialization process. And therefore, similar to the phase release discipline for the creation of products, our new commercial activation is essentially waterfall. It's got those stages and those gates that you move through. That's not to say that one can't employ Agile. In fact, many of the projects, such as outcomes generation, is repetitive. So it can be carried out in sprints, or what you might think of as sprints. For instance, you first create a set of assumptions about the outcomes that your solution might be providing for the customer. Then you do qualitative research. Then you might follow that up by quantitative research. And then finally, you might end with some affinity testing. And all these can be done in very manageable chunks or sprints. And you could have, in each, you could have a retrospective at the end, and you need to, right? So first you do your qualitative research, you follow up with a retrospective to see, okay, what did you get? Did you get what you expect? Do you need to tweak that at all? And then you go on to the next one, which would be the quantitative phase. Another example are Marcom programs. For instance, not too unlike your podcasts, we're currently creating a series of coffee break style video casts to educate our customers. And we do these at the pace of about one a month for a few of the product lines. And each video cast you can think of as a release, and the creation of the release has several well-defined sprints.
Well, I suppose maybe the ability to innovate within those podcasts means that you can ask different questions or structure them in different ways. So recently, for example, on our podcast with a past person that I interviewed, we went back and we started asking questions around the Agile Marketing Manifesto values, and that actually turned out to be a really good approach. But so, do you have you have that framework that you have to work within on the waterfall approach? But do you have what's the sort of level of flexibility there within those elements?
Yeah, understand your point there. Well, so you do learn. You do a sprint and you learn. You either did way more than you expected, so you might reduce the amount of story points going forward for some of the activities, or vice versa. You need to downscope because there was just you tried to do too much in too short a time. So it is useful because then you could sort of improve those programs going forward. You don't need to chunk out 8 things all at once. You do them as a series of releases, and you sort of improve along the way. Does that kind of get at what you were asking?
Oh, yes, Pete. Thank you. Thank you. So one of the main tenets of Agile marketing is to focus on customer value and business outcomes. Do you see this at GE Healthcare? And if so, how do you ensure there is a marketing focus on this?
Yeah, really important question. Our entire new commercial activation process is based on the creation of customer value, specifically tangible, quantified outcomes for our healthcare customers. Our new commercial activation process can actually be looked at as a process that brings outcomes to the market, not something that's been designed to bring products or features to market. So we look to deliver this value in one or more of 3 fundamental areas: operational, clinical, and financial. So for example, one of the first milestones in our new commercial activation process is called value drivers. And it's kicked off with a cross-functional workout that includes representatives from product engineering services, sales, marketing, global research teams, and it also includes customer representation. So very much a mixed team, not too unlike a Scrum in an Agile process. Although in this case, it's brought together for that one purpose of the creation of the values. So the artifact of that workout is a very clear, concise definition of our target market, target personas, and at least one compelling and competitively differentiated value driver for each. This workout also defines how we'll measure what we're delivering this value, both qualitatively as well as quantitatively, such as through customer testing, the research studies, and the like, right? Our pre-release milestones include testing that we've accomplished for this value creation with beta customers. And then finally, in the go-to-market, our Marcom tools and programs are all based on this work, such as value driver statements, ROI calculators, testimonials, and so forth. So yeah, where the outcomes is very much a core of all those processes. So even though those processes might be, at the 10,000 foot level waterfall, very much at each one of those steps, very focused on what we're delivering.
One of the questions you'd mentioned personas and so forth. I was just curious to know, do you do retrospectives and go back and sort of say, does the persona need, we learned something this time around, we need to update it? Is that like an ongoing process, or is it static?
No, it is. Although it's not as baked in as it would be traditionally in maybe a formal agile process. So one of the milestones that you need to go through in a new commercial activation process here is a very well-defined personas, because you want to know, like, who is this product for, or solution? Is it for everybody, or is it for a certain set? And then who do you message, and what does that messaging have to be? So very traditional type of marketing stuff. But we release it with a certain set of assumptions, and then we start to bring it to market and we start to sell it. But then we do have the next milestone is a retrospective to see, how are we doing with those initial customers? Are they getting the value that we perceived? Are they seeing different value? Are we messaging in the right way? Are we addressing the right market segments? And at that stage, you can tweak, but then you sort of go into now mass market, and usually you don't tweak it too much after it's mass market. So it's not a repetitive thing, but there are steps that are built in to our processes that do ensure that we do those retrospectives and we get a chance to tweak. At the campaign level, it goes on all the time. Again, a little more ad hoc. We'll do a series of tactics for a campaign. We'll look at the numbers. We do everything in Marketo, so it's very easy to keep track of how things are performing and get data.
That's great. So you mentioned to me that marketers who find themselves in an unagile organization can use agile marketing even with a team of one. Can you explain what you meant by this?
Sure. So I've already described that our marketing process is essentially waterfall, but each year we create an integrated marketing plan, and that connects Marcom, product marketing, and field marketing across the global regions. And in that plan, we start with our top 3 to 5 priorities for the year. Then each region and each function derives their top 3 to 5 priorities in support of those. So you could take a year-long view and say you're going to deliver these things by the end of the year to the organization. And that might be considered a waterfall approach for your marketing activities. But you can also take a week-long view or 2-week view and consider these sprints. So each week, for instance, I have a sprint planning process with myself and map out the 2 to 3 most important things I can accomplish or deliver in that week that gets me, that supports the accomplishment of my main priorities. And it has to be an actual delivery, such as recording a customer testimonial or completing a draft of the testimonial, certifying and releasing that testimonial. And it has to be black and white. It has to either be done or not. And I don't actually make them up each week. I have a backlog. So at the start of the year, when I get those top priorities, I break them down into tactics, programs, and other type of sub-activities, not too unlike a traditional project plan. Then I map those accomplishments against, I map the milestones for the accomplishments or the planned ones against all that I can do based on factors such as, do they support commercial activation milestone, a trade show, a marketing campaign, et cetera. That kind of anchors them on the calendar for the year. And that becomes my backlog. So each week I have a mini retrospective with myself on how the previous week went. Did I get it? Did I accomplish those things? And did I reprioritize as needed, decide what's in the next week's marketing sprint? And this is important. I block time on my calendar so that I have protected time that I'll use to work on these activities. Applying a term from personal finance, I call this paying myself first. That is, I take a certain percentage of my time for the week and dedicate it to accomplishing that week's sprint. And so this is prioritized over anything else for the week, any meeting, any other request, and so on. And then if any of your readers have read or are familiar with a book called The Four Disciplines of Success, or 4DX, this is going to sound very familiar to them. It's mainly that I'm employing this the Agile techniques at a personal level, as our organization as a whole doesn't use Agile. So my organization might not be Agile, but I can be.
Have you gone through the process of using that method and then describing to your colleagues what you do? And if so, has it influenced them in any way?
It is. One of the things that we're encouraged to do is, be mentors. So had people come to me and ask me about time management, or just how can I be successful at accomplishing more, or being perceived as accomplishing more, because that's pretty important, right? And so, yes, so I've explained these techniques, help them. And to some degree, they've been, adopted or personalized at that level. I think given that GE is so big and vast, getting them adopted at a broader level, would be difficult. So this grounds up kind of a root level approach is sort of the best I've been able to accomplish for now.
Can you describe scenarios in your work that have been challenging for using Agile marketing methods?
Yeah, well, it's always challenging, and let's say maybe tempting to be interrupt driven, right? To stop work and respond to an email, take a last minute meeting that's come in, or be pulled into something which looks to be important, right? But that you didn't intend to spend time on, or you didn't plan for. But if you pay yourself first each week, you've compensated for that. So you've built time in your schedule to handle the, what the 4DX process calls the whirlwind, but you still move forward towards your goals. And also when you're Agile and others aren't, that can be a little challenging or tricky too, because you can easily put the same expectations on others that you're putting on yourself. And over time, I learn who responds quickly and who needs prompting and so forth. And then I use this information in my sprint setting for the week. You kind of use those to weigh in the story points. That is, if one of my goals for the week is to accomplish something and I know I need someone else's assistance or input on that, I can weigh that in. And if they're an eagle and they always get things done quickly and respond quickly, the story points are going to be lower for accomplishing that activity. However, if they're, say, sort of more on the sluggish side, those story points are going to be higher, meaning more effort is going to be needed on my part. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Pete. So what advice do you give to other marketing leaders in adopting Agile for marketing, and especially in the instance where, because of the constraints of a highly regulated industry, having to use a waterfall framework?
Well, I would say, even if your organizations or peers aren't, you can, and I hope I provided some examples for that. And I think we're all motivated to do our best and to do more and to go fast. And, certainly, with no shortage of pressures on our time these days, right? But if you use an Agile process, you've got sort of an inspection methodology that you can see how you're doing, because it's easy to start off the year with really great intentions and a great plan, and then you get off track, and then you don't realize you're off track, and then you're mid-year and you're like, whoa, what happened, right? So the thing is, whatever you put in place, make sure that you've got inspection points, you're regularly looking in. And then I'll just say again, the importance of really blocking your time, and also making it easy for yourself to use the time you've got effectively. Like one of the things I do is make sure that at the end of the day, I've gone through my email so that there's no email in my inbox other that wouldn't fit on one page. Because what I try to do is, if I touch an email, I have one of three rules. I either respond and do something with it, or I file it, or I just delete it and I'm not going to respond. And you got to have some strict rules for yourself to get through that, because otherwise you'll just find yourself drowning, unless you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you don't have a lot of that going on. So good time management, making sure you got an introspection method, then also experimenting, because that's also part of the Agile process. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to encourage others to experiment as well. I mean, you come up with a great idea. The worst that can happen is somebody says no.
Thank you, Pete. This has been a great conversation, and also, I think, an interesting perspective. I really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome, John. Nice to speak to you again. And as I say, I hope your readership values these conversations, and it would be great to hear from some of them as well as to how they're doing with these techniques.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us on the deep dive into Agile marketing with John Cass. My thanks to Pete, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, visit www.businessagility.institute.